Some of it has to do with the neo-pagan reconstruction of a sacred past that sees these traditions as having been appropriated from that heritage. But the main thing that I want to address today is the fact that not a lot of folks have been trained to do a lot of critical research or to think critically about their research. They see these claims appearing on a bunch of different websites in a Google search, and so they think, well, these claims must be established, they must be verified, they must be true. But that's not the case. Websites can say literally whatever they want. And even critical peer-reviewed scholarship frequently makes claims without properly vetting them. And I'm going to illustrate that with a couple of claims about Christmas and Easter. But let's start with a claim that appears in a couple different pieces of actual critical scholarship that I think sits at the root of the notion that Christian authorities within the Roman Empire moved the celebration of Christmas to December 25th in order to appropriate a celebration that pre-existed within the Roman Empire. So let's take a look. So this is a page on the origins of Christmas from Ronald Hutton's 1996 book, The Stations of the Sun, A History of the Ritual Year in Britain. And I want to read the highlighted portion, which is talking about December 25th. The reason for the choice of this date and the success of it was stated with admirable candor by a Christian writer, the Scriptor Sirius, in the late 4th century. It was a custom of the pagans to celebrate on the same 25th December the birthday of the sun, at which they kindled lights in token of festivity. In these solemnities and revelries the Christians also took part. Accordingly, when the doctors of the church perceived that the Christians had a leaning to this festival, they took counsel and resolved that the true nativity should be solemnized on that day. We've got another more recent example of this claim as well. So this is from Richard Cohen's 2011 book, Chasing the Sun, the epic story of the star that gives us life. And the same quote is used there, and it is introduced thusly. The advantages of Christmas Day being celebrated then were obvious, as the Christian commentator Sirius wrote. Now this quote is attributed to a 4th century writer, but the earliest we can find this exact quote is actually in Fraser's The Golden Bough from the 19th century. But Fraser did not invent it out of whole cloth. It was drawn from an earlier manuscript, but tweaked a little bit. And that earlier manuscript does not go back to the 4th century. It only goes back to the 12th century. There's a manuscript by an author named Dionysius Barsalibi that has an anonymous marginal note scribbled in that says something very closely related to what Fraser wrote, but not exactly the same. Well, let's take a look at that note. So this is a page from Volume 2 of the Bibliotheca Orientalis Clementina Vaticana from the 18th century, and this is most likely where Fraser pulled this quote from, translating from the Latin, but tweaking it a little bit. And if you look in the left column, right before the Syriac text begins, we have this reference to this marginal note from an anonymous Syrian writer, which is where we later get the notion that this is somebody's name, Cyrus. And here's what the Latin on the right column says. The reason then why the fathers of the church moved the January 6th celebration to December 25th was this, they say. It was the custom of the heathen to celebrate on this same December 25th the birthday of the sun, and they lit lights then to exalt the day. Even Christians were participants in these rites and ceremonies. When, therefore, the teachers of the church saw that Christians inclined to this custom, they established a plan. The true natal feast would be celebrated on this day, and Epiphany on January 6th. So the quote is somewhat different, but still, this does not go back to the 4th century. This is an anonymous note scribbled into the margin of a 12th century manuscript, and there are no data that pre-exist this manuscript that support this notion. Now this claim can be found all over the internet, and it appears in actual scholarship that was published as recently as about 11 years ago. And it's not true. It was something that became widespread as conventional wisdom because people accepted it without tracking down the sources. We have a similar situation with Easter. There's a claim that you can find all over the internet that Easter is based on the celebration of a spring goddess named Ostra or Ostara, whose symbols were bunnies and eggs. And there is only one source in all the world for this connection between Easter and some deity named Ostra. Let's take a look at that source. So this is a scan of a 12th century manuscript, one of the best available that we have, of the 8th century text on the reckoning of time by the Christian monk Beda. And I've highlighted some of the Latin here, and this is what it says. Easter Monat has a name which is now translated Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Eustra, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now that is the grand total of all of the ancient data that we have regarding any Germanic spring goddess named Eustra. No connection to rabbits, no connection to eggs. Any claim to those connections is something that someone has made up since the 18th or 19th century as a result of the formalization of rabbits and eggs in association with Easter in many Christian cultures, but not all, around the world. So if you try to track down these sources, you will find that what websites frequently claim over and over and over and over again, and what you can even find in some scholarship, is not always the case. And if you would like some more critical scholarship on any putative relationship between Eustra and rabbits and eggs, here's some more scholarship you can look at.